But on your third attempt, you're a little more successful.
So third attempt is when I start getting it. This is when I start helping out, let's say, building things for the internet. So around 95, I think it is, or 96, I discovered the internet. Actually, in ninth grade, that was my first experience. I went to some university in Denmark, and in ninth grade, we had this excursion, and they sat us down in front of a computer, and the computer had Netscape Navigator, the first version, or maybe it was even the precursor to that. And they had a text editor, and us kids just got like, hey, build something on the internet. And it was just HTML. And the first thing you do is like, oh, I can make the text blink by just putting in this tag and saving it. That was that moment. That was actually when I reawakened the urge to want to learn to program because I got a positive experience. All the other experiences I had with programming was I'd spend hours typing something in, I'd click run, and it wouldn't work. And I'd get an error message that made no sense to me as a kid, either at 6 or 7 or at 12. And here I am sitting in front of a computer connected to the internet, and I'm making text blink. I'm making it larger. I'm turning it into an H1 or an H2. And these guys out here, we just did it for like an hour and a half. And suddenly I go, oh, I can make things for the internet that someone in Germany can be able to access and see. And I don't have to ask anyone for permission. This is super cool. I got to do more of this. So I got into the internet. I got into working with HTML, and I still had all these friends from these demo parties. And I started working with them on creating gaming websites. I'd write about the video games. I'd review them. This was another good way of getting new video games was to walk down to some store and say like, hey, I'm a journalist. Right. I'm like this 15-year-old kid. And they're looking at me. You're a journalist? Yeah. Can I borrow some games? Because this was when games moved on to the PlayStation and these other things you couldn't just as easily pirate, at least not at first. So I went down there, did all that, and that started the journey of the internet for me. It started working on these gaming websites, working with programmers, figuring out that I could do something. I could work on the HTML part. It's not really programming, but it kind of smells like it. You're talking to a computer, you're making it put text on the screen, and you're communicating with someone halfway around the world. So that became my pathway back into programming. And then slowly I picked up more and more of it. First website I did with someone, one of these programmers from the demo scene that was dynamic, was ASP.NET. It wasn't even actually called .NET. That was what we started on. And then we moved on to PHP. And PHP was when I finally got it, when it finally clicked. When conditionals and loops and variables and all of that stuff started to make sense enough to me that I thought, I can do this.
So would it be fair to say that we wouldn't have DHH without PHP, and therefore you owe all your success to PHP?
100% that's true. And it's even better than that, because PHP to me didn't just give me a start in terms of making my own web applications. It actually gave me a bar. In many ways, I think the pinnacle of web developer ergonomics is late 90s PHP. You write this script, you FTP it to a server, and instantly it's deployed. Yep. Instantly it's available. You change anything in that file and you reload, boom, it's right there. There's no web servers, there's no setup. There's just an Apache that runs mod PHP. And it was essentially the easiest way to get a dynamic web page up and going. And this is one of the things I've been chasing that high for basically the rest of my career, that it was so easy to make things for the internet in the mid to late 90s. How did we lose the sensibilities that allowed us to not just work this way, but get new people into the industry to give them those success experiences that I had, adding a freaking blink tag to an HTML page, FTPing a PHP page to an Apache web server without knowing really anything about anything, without knowing anything about frameworks, without knowing anything about setup. All of that stuff have really taken us to a place where it sometimes feels like we're barely better off. Like web pages aren't that different from what they were in the late 90s, early 2000s. They're still just forms. They still just write to databases. A lot of people, I think, are very uncomfortable with the fact that they are essentially CRUD monkeys. They just make systems that create, read, update, or delete rows in a database. And they have to compensate for that existential dread by overcomplicating things. Now, that's a bit of a character. There's more to it, and there's things you can learn for more sophisticated ways of thinking about this, but there's still an ideal here, which is why I was so happy you had Peter Levels on, because he still basically works like this.
Yeah.
And I look at that and go like, man, that's amazing.
Yeah, you're chasing that high. He's been high all along.
Yes.
Using PHP, jQuery, and SQLite.
I think it's amazing because he's proving that this isn't just a nostalgic dream. He's actually doing it. He's running all these businesses. Now, some of that is, as he would admit up front, is that he's just one guy. And you can do different things when you're just one guy. When you're working in a team, when I started working on a team, when I started working with Jason Fried on Basecamp, we at first didn't use version control together. I used version control for myself, and then I thought, you know what? Designers, they're probably not smart enough to figure out CVS.
Yeah.
And therefore, I just like, no, you just FTP it up. You just FTP it. I knew they knew how to do FTP. And then after the third time I had overridden their changes, I was like, God damn it. I guess I got to teach Jason CVS to not do that again. But I think there's still way more truth to the fact that we can work the way we did in the 90s, work the way Peter works today, even in the team context, and that we've been far too willing to hand over far too much of our developer ergonomics to the merchants of complexity.
And you've been chasing that with Rails 8. So how do you bring all the cool features of a modern framework and make it no build, make it as easy to create something and to ship it as it was in the 90s with just PHP? It's very difficult for me to beat the Peter Levels approach. Of just it's so easy to just ship some PHP.
And it should be. Why should it be harder than that? Our computers today are almost infinitely faster than what they were in the 90s. So shouldn't we be able to work in even easier ways? We should be looking back on the 90s and go like, oh, that was way too complicated. Now we have more sophisticated technology that's way faster, and it allows us to work in these easier to use ways, but that's not true. But now you can see the line I draw in my work with Ruby on Rails, and especially with Rails 8. No build, to me, is reaching back to that 90s feeling and going, now we can do some of those things without giving up on all the progress. Because I do think you can get too nostalgic. I do think you can start just fantasizing that everything was better in the 90s. It wasn't. I mean, I was there. There was a lot of things that sucked. And if we can somehow find a way to combine the advantages and advances we've had over the past 20 years with that ease of developer ergonomics, we can win.